The last dance of Leora, the Diamond Lily Ball, was more than an event. It was a legend. Held once a year in the grand halls of Valmere Estate, it was a night where time stilled, where candlelight danced upon polished marble, and where the air hummed with whispered secrets. Those who entered left transformed, not by magic, but by a single evening where possibilities unraveled like a waltz in motion. Leora had attended the ball every year, but tonight, something felt different. The moment she stepped through the gilded doors, wrapped in silk and silver, a strange current rippled through her, as if the night itself held its breath, waiting. Her gown, a vision of moonlight woven into fabric, shimmered as she moved through the crowd. In her hands, she held a single white lily. Tradition dictated that those who carried one sought an answer, a wish, a truth waiting to be revealed. Leora's heart was burdened with one such truth. She had spent 3 years haunted by a ghost that was not dead, a love that had vanished without a farewell, a man whose touch still lingered in the folds of her memory. And then, she saw him, standing at the far end of the ballroom, half hidden beneath the golden glow of chandeliers. He was dressed in midnight and silver, his mask a work of intricate artistry, curling like ivy over his sharp cheekbones. But she would have known him anywhere. Cassian. Her breath hitched. His voice had been nothing more than foolish longing, yet here he was. And he was watching her. The orchestra swelled, the waltz unfolding like a whispered invitation. Leora hesitated for only a moment before stepping onto the marble floor. The crowd shifted, parting as if fate itself guided her path. Each step brought her closer to the man she once called hers. He did not move, not as she stopped before him, not as the music wrapped around them, pulling at their silence. And then, softly, deliberately, Cassian held out his hand. Leora stared at it, the past and present folding into each other like silk. Then finally, she placed her hand in his. The touch was a whisper of warmth, a promise and a question all at once. Without a word, he led her into the waltz. The world around them faded, just music, movement, memory. His hand pressed lightly against the small of her back, guiding her as if they had never parted. But they had. Leora swallowed against the ache rising in her throat. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice barely carried by the waltz. Cassian's fingers tightened around hers. "And yet, here I am." Leora searched his face, but his mask hid too much. Only his eyes, dark and searching, held the truth she could not yet read. She had spent years imagining this moment. But now that it was here, she did not know what she wanted from it. A demand? An apology? A reason for why he had left without a single word? Or simply this, one last dance before she let go. The music slowed, the final notes curling through the air like the end of a sigh. Cassian's grip lingered. "Come with me," he murmured. Leora's pulse quickened. "Why?" Cassian hesitated. Then, ever so softly, "Because I owe you the truth." The room spun in golden candlelight, the air thick with stolen glances and murmured secrets. Leora had spent years waiting for an answer, and now it was time to decide if she truly wanted it. The ballroom shimmered behind them as Leora followed Cassian through the arching corridors of Valmere Estate. The air outside the grand hall was cooler, quieter, thick with the weight of a past that had never truly faded. Cassian led her through a side door, past golden sconces flickering along the walls. Leora hesitated, 3 years apart, and now she was stepping into the unknown with him once more. But hadn't she always? At last, they reached the estate's east balcony, overlooking the gardens, where ivy-wrapped statues glowed beneath the moon. Beyond the terrace, the vast lake stretched like a mirror of silver and ink, rippling with the whisper of night. Cassian finally turned to face her. Even with his mask, Leora could feel the intensity of his gaze, 1,000 questions burned on her tongue, but only one escaped. "Why did you leave?" Cassian's breath hitched. For a moment he was silent, as if the words could not form. Then, so quietly it could have been mistaken for a sigh, he spoke. "Because if I hadn't, you would be in danger." Leora frowned. "Danger?" He exhaled, raking a hand through his hair. "You think I vanished by choice?" He let out a hollow chuckle. "I was forced to disappear, Leora." Something in his voice, frustration, regret, made her chest tighten. "I don't understand." He turned, bracing his hands against the marble railing. "I never told you the truth about who I am." A cold knot twisted in Leora's stomach. The Cassian she had known was a mystery, yes, but she had never doubted the way he had loved her. Every stolen touch, every whispered promise. But now, standing before her beneath the moonlight, he felt like something just beyond reach. "Tell me now," she said, stepping closer. Cassian hesitated, then slowly removed his mask. The face beneath was one she had traced in dreams, one she had memorized in stolen moments. But now, in the moon's glow, she saw something she had not noticed before. Just beneath his jaw, a faint silver marking, etched like a crest upon his skin. A noble's crest. Leora inhaled sharply. "You're the heir to the House of Valmir." The world tilted. The Valmir name was legend, a dynasty of power and influence, of wealth and secrets whispered behind velvet drapes. And Cassian, her Cassian, was its heir. She shook her head. "No, that's not possible. If that were true, why would you have danced with the merchant's daughter?" He gave her a wry, sorrowful smile. "Because I never cared about titles, Leora. I cared about you." The past unraveled before her. Late-night rendezvous, whispered dreams of escaping to the countryside, promises of a future where love was all that mattered. But it had never been that simple. Leora clenched her fingers around the lily still in her grasp. "Then why didn't you tell me?" Cassian's jaw tightened. "Because I was being watched. The night before I left, my father learned about us. He told me I had a choice. Stay with you and see you ruined, or disappear and keep you safe." The words struck like ice down her spine. 3 years. 3 years of unanswered questions, of wondering if she had been abandoned for something as simple as indifference. But now, Leora swallowed against the sharp ache in her throat. "And now?" Cassian's gaze softened. "And now, my father is dead." Silence stretched between them. "I came back for you, Leora. The moment I was free, I searched for you." He reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. "But I understand if it's too late." Leora stared at him, at the man who had once been her world, at the truth she had wanted for so long but never expected to hear. Her heart ached with the weight of time lost, but beneath it, something new took root. A flicker of hope, fragile but real. "Do you remember the last thing you told me before you left?" she asked. Cassian tilted his head, brow furrowed. Leora stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth against the chill of night. "You told me you would come back," she whispered, "that I should wait for you." His lips parted, his eyes searching hers. "And you did?" A slow, bittersweet smile curled on Leora's lips. "I tried not to." Cassian let out a breathless laugh, one full of sorrow and something else, something resembling relief. "I don't deserve a second chance," he murmured. "Then don't waste it," she said, pressing the lily into his palm, his fingers curled around hers. "Leora." She did not answer, not with words. Instead, she stepped forward, allowing herself to close the last remaining space between them. And as the night stretched long and the stars burned bright, Cassian kissed her like a man who had spent 3 years searching for home, only to find it, at last, in her arms. The world outside the ballroom was silent. but the air between them crackled with something dangerous, something unspoken. Cassian's fingers still curled around the white lily she had pressed into his palm, its fragile petals stark against his warm skin. He stared at it for a long moment, his thumb grazing the delicate edges, as if it were her he touched. Hesitant, reverent. Leora shivered, though the night was warm. Not from cold, but from the way Cassian was looking at her now, as if she were something precious, something he had lost and would do anything to hold on to again. "Come with me," he whispered. His voice was low, rough with emotion, thick with the weight of all that had gone unsaid between them. Leora didn't hesitate. This time, she was the one to take his hand. Cassian led her through the dim corridors of Valmere Estate, their footsteps echoing in the silence. She should have felt nervous, walking deeper into the unknown, but she didn't. She had spent 3 years longing for answers, for closure. Now, all she wanted was this moment. Him. They reached a darkened room, its door left slightly ajar, and Cassian pushed it open with a slow, deliberate motion. Inside, candlelight flickered across tall bookshelves and velvet-draped furniture. A study, perhaps, or a forgotten sanctuary hidden from the grandeur of the ball. But Leora barely registered her surroundings. Because the moment they stepped inside, Cassian turned, closing the door behind them. The latch clicked into place, the sound sharp in the hush between them. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Cassian exhaled, a sound that was almost a laugh, soft, disbelieving. "Tell me this isn't a dream." Leora's lips parted, her breath uneven. "If it were, would you want to wake up?" Cassian didn't answer. He didn't need to. In one swift step, he was there, his hands finding her waist, his fingers pressing into the silk of her gown as if afraid she might disappear. Leora barely had time to draw a breath before his lips were on hers, warm and urgent, igniting something deep in her chest that had been waiting to burn. The kiss was not delicate. It was 3 years of longing, of questions, of nights spent staring at the moon wondering what if. Leora pressed closer, her fingers slipping into his hair, pulling him deeper into her. Cassian groaned softly against her lips, his hands sliding over the curve of her back, tracing the edges of the gown that still separated them. "Leora," he breathed against her mouth, her name a confession, a prayer. She shivered as his lips moved lower, trailing along her jaw, his breath hot against her skin. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons of his jacket, the rich fabric stiff beneath her touch. He let out a low chuckle, his hands guiding hers, helping her undo the layers that had kept them apart for too long. The velvet slid from his shoulders, pooling onto the floor. Cassian looked down at her then, his gaze dark, heated. "Say the word," he murmured. "If you want to stop." "I don't," she whispered. Cassian cursed softly, his grip tightening as he pulled her against him. The heat of his body, the steady press of his heartbeat against hers. It was everything she had missed, everything she had dreamed of. His lips found hers again, slower this time, deeper. His hands slid down, finding the laces of her gown, loosening them with deliberate ease. Silk rustled, pooling in soft waves at her feet. Cassian stilled, his gaze roaming over her, his chest rising and falling as if he were struggling to catch his breath. "You are." He exhaled, shaking his head slightly, a look of pure reverence in his eyes. "I have no words for you, Leora." She smiled, reaching for him, pulling him back down to her. "Then don't speak," she murmured against his lips. And so he didn't. The night stretched on, the candlelight flickering against the walls, casting shadows that moved in a slow, intimate rhythm. Leora had spent 3 years waiting for answers. But here, in Cassian's arms, in the quiet hush of a stolen moment, she realized she had already found them.